Bela denies that she and Tzril could be the sisters, but Tzril believes implicitly that Bela is her half-sister and declares that if she could, she would go immediately to the Kafkas to meet her. However, fate steps in. Tzril becomes pregnant and she names her first child Hinda Devera. She has learned the name of her mother. Hinda for Yossel's mother and Devera for her own. Meanwhile, Tzril and Bela begin corresponding, and Tzril becomes obsessed with the desire to visit her new-found sister. After the birth of Tzril's second daughter, Esther, Yossel and other young men of the town are forced to flee to America to escape the draft. You know, they drafted anybody, the Russians, for 25 years. 2 years passed, and Yossel and a few of the other young men returned secretly. Yossel brings money to take his wife to America. Yossel does not want to go. Her heart is set on meeting Bela. I'm sorry that we have. Finally, she agrees to go to America, and she is convinced there is no future in Russia. Unexpectedly, Yossel is reported to the police, and so he again flees the country. But this time he believes his family will soon follow. You know, my mother tells the story of that, her mother told her, my grandmother, waking up in the middle of the night with her father pouring over them with a candle in his hand, and the tears are rolling down his cheeks. He is saying goodbye again. He has to flee, say goodbye to his little sister, my grandmother. But fate steps in, and the day that Tzril is to leave for America with the other women, she suffers a miscarriage, and the others leave without her. Tzril keeps finding excuses for not going to America. It's a treifa land. Treifa means not kosher, and so forth. In the meantime, her little daughter, Esther, dies, and Tzril is most despondent. To help Tzril, Yossel finally sends permission for Tzril to go to the Kafkas to see Bela, who will pay the cost. Yossel urges Tzril to come to America as soon as possible, as they have been apart too long, 2 years at that time. Well, Tzril becomes the sensation of the town. Who ever heard of a Jewish woman getting a travel permit, a visa, let alone having the courage to make a journey of more than 1,000 miles outside the Pillar settlement with only a small child? Finally, Tzril and Hinda travel by train and coach to the Kafkas and meet Bela, her half-sister, and her husband. It is love at first sight. All of Tzril's fears and doubts melt away. Her newfound family love her and promise to make her their heir. Besides being printers, Bela and her husband are vintners, and they teach Tzril the secret of making the kosher wine. Tzril stays for 7 years. Needless to say, Yossel threatens to divorce her, but Bela is dying, and she wills the printing press to Tzril. After Bela's death and a 9-year separation, Tzril returns to Kovna to meet Yossel, who has again journeyed from America. Tzril and Yossel are finally reunited and reconciled, and eventually, in 1885, Tzril and her family come to America, to Jersey City, where she obtains permission from the rabbis to make the kosher wine. She became known as Tzril the winemaker for all of Jersey City and Bayonne. The adventures of her travels, the many humorous and charming anecdotes of the story, can be summed up by a phrase in one of the many fan letters that my mother had received. This beautiful story was written for all the Jewish immigrants and their descendants. We can all identify with Tzril, a liberated woman before before her time. And now I want to read to you from some of the reviews from the newspapers. You know, this book was printed 3 times. First, this is the last one. The first one was printed by my sister Miriam. For the whole family, we did it by the family. And it was a blue binding with a black spiral, you know, and it looked like it was hand typewritten. But then a friend of my sister was an artist, and she worked in an advertising agency, and one of her customers came in. Her name was Bertha Kolachevsky. She was a publisher. And she saw this blue book binding, and she looked through it. She said, you know, I would like to publish this book. You know, you can go crazy looking for a publisher for anything. And so she took the book, and she and her husband added a glossary in the back of Yiddish expressions, which are in this book too. And they printed 500 copies, and it went out of print. She said it was the only book she ever printed that was completely sold out, with its photographs in it. But then more people wanted the book, and my niece, Susie, lived in New York, and she found another publisher when he saw the second book, which was a source cover book, and he looked through. He said, you know, I'm going to publish this book, and this is the result. The third printing was in hardback, and I'm going to let you look at it. And there's photographs in here, and I want to show the photograph. When I gave this book, this story to my sisterhood in Florida, this is the second book we have. This picture, Miriam, Living, blew up this big, and I had it out there. And this is their picture of Hinda, Tzril, and her husband Yassel. And I'll pass it around. And I've got to tell you that when Hinda grew up in New York, she was 15 when she came, or 14, she wanted to be a couturier, to make beautiful clothes. And so her father said she could go to New York, and she studied to make clothing. And the dress that she's wearing, this is her engagement dress, is a green velvet dress that she made herself. And her mother is wearing the copy of a dress made for the Queen Victoria War. And her husband is wearing what is known as a Prince Albert. So I thought that was really something. You can pass that around. And I also want to read to you a couple short synopses of some of the wonderful reviews. One of them is from the right here, from the San Francisco Chronicle, the book review section, June 12, 1988. That's when that book was published, in June of 1988. And I just want to read here. Waldman, her name was under by Bess Waldman, has a gift for illuminating the commonplace. In other words, my mother had a way of, somebody said something, she could embellish it and make it bigger than life. And when Cyril's stepsister falls ill, she takes on mythic proportions. Her body was bloated with fluid and seemed twice its normal size, is how my mother would write. Waldman writes, while her eyes were reduced to tiny slits in the mound of fevered flesh that surrounded them. They reminded Hinda of black cherry pits. When Tzril finally rejoins her husband in America, the Golden Land, she hopes her life will ease. Yet there is one final obstacle to overcome, and in some ways it is the biggest. How can you keep to an orthodox belief in a country hungry for secular success? And one wonderful review, and this is another one that was given in the by Dr. Marsha Posner, who writes for the a New York newspaper. I think it's the name of it. Newsday, yes. And this is the last paragraph of this. Look at this large review that he made. I mean, he was really impressed with this book. Irving Howe, a very famous author, gives us vignettes, world of our fathers. And E. Lasbenik gave her own life story of the same time in the book Such a Life. But Waldman gives us a sociological and psychological history that surpasses the others. Read it as history. Read it for entertainment, but read it. That was what my brother wrote.
Mm-hmm.